Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Copy Corner with your host, Terry Schilling.
And Dan Marzullo.
Welcome to our corner of the internet, The Copy Corner, where we like to share copywriting, content writing tips to help grow your business. Because if you are a business owner, right, you are a copywriter. You're writing copy, you're writing content, you're trying to build brand awareness. And a lot of people watch the show too. Write copy for clients, a lot of freelance copywriters. We're sharing tips all across the board. We like to start the conversation. And that's really the big one for today's episode, Dan. We want to really embrace debate here with the topic today. So what are we going to be talking about today? As everybody can already read, for what the show's going to be about. But let's keep them in suspense.
No. So we are talking about blogs versus article. What's the difference?
It's a game show today on What's the Difference? Blogs versus articles. In this corner, we have blogs, short form, personal, written content versus articles, long form, stat-based content. That's the difference. Thank you for listening.
Right. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. But Dan, I want you to start because it's so interesting to me because I feel like we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago when we did a show about how to write articles faster and some effective tips. But then we also talked about, we called it articles, right? So we hear the differences of like people say, is it a blog? Is it an article? Sometimes I've even said, I've combined them. I've said, yeah, I write blog articles, right? It's just like, it kind of makes no sense. They're so intertwined. But go ahead and start, saying what you think the biggest differences are.
Yeah, sure thing, Terry. So when I think of blog posts, I typically think of shorter form pieces, right? Usually between like 300 to 1,000 words max versus article is usually a lot longer. Blogs are usually pretty SEO driven, right? That's a big purpose behind them is driving traffic to the site. Whereas an article, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a lot more of a thought leadership play, right? So those are kind of two big ones. The next thing is where is the piece published, right? If it's published on your personal website or your brand site, a lot of times you'll hear people refer to that as, go check out this blog post on my site versus an article that's usually published on, an online publication or digital magazine or something like that, right? So those are kind of the main things that stick out in my mind. And that's kind of ultimately how I decipher it in my head is, okay, am I publishing something on a site for a brand? It's probably a blog post. If I'm writing an article, it's for a publication that's, getting a lot of views. It's like an online magazine, right? And part of that too is usually, when you're writing for your own site, you're getting your info in that post out there and you're publishing it. Whereas an article, there's usually a lot more work involved. You're doing some background research to include a lot of stats, like you mentioned, Terry, figures, things like that. Or if you're interviewing individuals and quoting sources, that takes a lot more time and a lot more work. So that's usually kind of, looked at as an article. And then too, if you're publishing that on a magazine website, it's probably going to go through several rounds of edits and revisions to make sure it's as polished as possible for that audience versus if it's your own brand site, you might not go into that much detail. So those, in my mind, that's kind of the ultimate differentiation between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on this. I think a big thing like blogs are, they are typically more personal. Like you follow these thought leaders or other people on the internet, like if they have personal brand websites, it's usually the tab is said, read the blog. Like it doesn't say read my articles. It's just blog. Or it could say like publications. But those are typically in first person blogs, and then articles are typically written in second or third person because they are a little bit more factual. Now blogs, we're not saying they can't be factual. You're going to include stats there, but it's typically more of like your personal opinion and doing some statistics. And articles can even be in written form or like in print, right? So you have like newspaper articles. And then if newspapers have a blog, it's usually a personal written piece by the writer. But Dan, what should you call it on your website? I think that's like a big thing. Not you specifically, Dan, just our guest, our general audience. Like, should I call it blogs? Is that what I'm writing? Should I market my services as I write? Do I write content blogs? Do I write content articles? Like, how would you say, like, if you were marketing your services?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Terry. I think a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference and, how
Yeah.
you want your brand to be represented. But for me, I've always really liked the good old classic blog tab on the website, because if I'm going to, a brand's website and I'm debating on whether or not I should buy their product or service, and I want to learn more about it first, I want to read some articles on what they have to say on what they do and why they're the leader in that industry. So typically my mind's going to go, oh, click, the blog tab to find these articles. So it's quick and easy to understand, okay, this is where those blog posts live. I'm going to click that link. I think sometimes people get too fancy with it and they call it something else to where you don't even know what that tab is, right? So you might not know, oh, this is where all their blog posts live. So you could be searching all over their site trying to figure that out. But I've seen a bunch of different things, right? If you have other resources like us, right? Like a podcast or a YouTube channel, usually they'll call that a resources tab. And then under that, you'll have podcasts, blog posts, or whatever. So that's my kind of thoughts on it, Terry. What about you?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because let's say you call your blog like My Two Cents, like that's the name of it, right? If you put that as your navigation tab, people will be like, what the hell is this? They're probably going to overlook that, right? So I think even just having it say blog is just more efficient and effective there, especially from an SEO standpoint. I think one way you can get around it, like marketing your services, what I see a lot of people do is say content writing, right? Like content writing. Do you need longer form articles, right? And let kind of like your client dictate what they're going to call it. But if you need content writing, right, I can do that, right? You can do short form blogs, case studies, more detailed research articles. We can do that. If you're watching this on YouTube with us, we're going to do a quick screen share of Copy Hackers and HubSpot. And obviously we'll talk this throughout for everybody listening to the audio right now as well. But I just wanted to go through, because Copy Hackers, you go to their site, and what they say is copywriting articles and case studies. So it even has like this tab here, copywriting articles. If you click it, you go through it, and they don't call it their blog. This is their article. So SaaS websites, is shorter copy really better? How to write a landing page for problem-aware visitors. And so, Tyler Koenig is actually a friend of mine. Shout out to him. And Dan, I know you've.
I was going to say, that's a familiar face.
Yeah, exactly. So it's cool to see him on there. Obviously, Joanne Wiebe is a big, creator of Copy Hackers, but that's what they call it. So I found that pretty interesting. But if you go to HubSpot, who's a very, marketing hub, no pun intended, right? Yeah, they have all these different, resources for business owners, marketers, but also they have a really popular blog, and that's what they call it. Like if you go to resources on their website and you look up under education, it's blog. They have other ebooks, guides, courses, but here, how to write a blog post, what is YouTube CPM, Project Co reveals project management statistics. That's what they call it. And so I guess at the end of the day, Dan, nobody's really wrong or right with what they, what you want to call it here. But just know that there are some differences, I guess, that people will say with the blog. And I think it is more personal, and the articles, again, are more stat-based, and they're usually typically longer forms. But maybe don't make the mistake of like I write blog articles, like maybe like I have and some others. I've seen that like mentioned on Twitter as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're all guilty of saying that at some point.
Yeah. So we thought this would be a fun topic. And again, embrace debate, in the comments. And if you're listening, let us know what you think the big differences are, what you call it on your site. How do you market your services if you're writing articles or blogs? We'd love to kind of get other people's feedback on that.
Yeah, definitely. Chime in below.
Yeah. Hopefully that kind of clears some things up if you're wondering what are the big differences between blogs and articles. But thank you, everyone, for listening to today's Copy Corner here live on YouTube. But again, everybody who listens on podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, we appreciate all the feedback, the downloads, the reviews. So make sure you keep that up and tell friends about the Copy Corner and how much fun you're having and how much you're learning.
Exactly.
All right, everybody. Dan, anything else before we say goodbye?
No, that's it, man.
All right, beautiful. We're under the 10-minute marks. We're on brand. All right, everybody. Love what you do. Proceed with passion. And we will see you on the next Copy Corner.